proliferation of digital modes. It's amazing. But I think probably we've given enough time for everyone to be here. So Patrick, do we want to get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay. Been playing around trying to get DPRS. Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. I'm probably not going to mention DPRS, but that's the D-Star interface for collecting location information and gating it into APRS. And best done at the D-Star repeater. So Michael, if you aren't doing it at the repeater, it works best from there. If you're trying to do it from a handheld, it takes the cooperation of the repeater operator from what I've seen. Weather data by radio using home-built and home-designed microcontrollers. And high-altitude balloon tracking with APRS is fantastic. I like to watch the balloons fly around the planet, especially the ones that have circumnavigated what the record's like 10 or 15 times a floater has gone around the planet, one balloon. Anyway, APRS from A to Z. That's what we're here to talk about. And we're going to go from AX25 up to APZ XXX, but not everything in between. So rest easy on that. I did try to find the activity going on around Huntsville, and it looks like there's one iGate that's putting out 3 repeater objects. And I saw 2 or 3 mobiles running around the other day, but you've got a dearth of APRS activity out there. So hopefully there'll be more. I can imagine balloons are launching from your office building for sure.
There was a lot last weekend.
Oh, at Huntsville?
For the Hamfest, yeah.
Yeah, I wish I would have captured that traffic. That would have been good. So we're going to talk about AX25 packet format. I dive deep first, and then we come up for air and learn what we can do with all the stuff that APRS is. So we're going to talk about the packet format, the infrastructure, digipeaters, iGates, stuff like that. Then we're finally going to get to getting started with APRS, what kind of hardware is out there, and some things that you can use APRS for. But first, I should tell you a little bit about myself. Who is KJ4ERJ? There's a wiki article for me that has my story. The first time I ran into this, I believe was in a popular electronics magazine in the 1970s, where I read an article about AX25. But I didn't have money, was not a ham, didn't know any hams. So I read the article. This sounds like pretty cool stuff, but I can't afford it. So I put it to the side. Then in 2008, my son, KJ4DXK, and 2 of his friends came in and said, we're going to become hams. We're going to get ham licenses. You need to do it too, Dad. I said, don't you need to know code for that? They said, oh, you don't need code anymore. I said, I'm in. Count me in. And of course, Patrick, KJ4OVR, came in right after that, a couple of months later, and my wife also, who is KJ4OVQ. And she was actually supposed to be KJ4OVR. And she told the guys at the examination room that Patrick's probably going to be much more active. He should have the cooler call sign. So that's how Patrick became over, and my wife is Oscar Victor Quebec. But we played around with GPS when my son was probably in his early teens. We did geocaching. He built me a GPS-based digital speedometer for my 1985 car, which is still on the dashboard, although the display has given up. And then in August, September, I took a look at APRS and said, wow, this is the merge of everything, the ham stuff, the GPS stuff, the location stuff. I took one look at UI View and said, oh, that looks like a Windows 3.1 app. And then I learned that the source code was destroyed, so it would never be anything but what it was. So I started working on APRS ISCE on Windows Mobile. Windows Mobile is Windows CE for those that didn't know, and then realized that this is just Win32 code. I can build it for Windows desktops and put OpenStreetMaps into it in August of 2009. And then in 2013, I switched over to an Android phone and started working on an Android client called APRS ISMO, but currently it's actually called Test Host. And there's a link to it, and I'll make these slides available to you, and I'll send an email out with a link to where the PowerPoint is when we're done with all this. So now that you know who I am and where I'm coming from, what in the world is APRS? Oh, and by the way, this is fully interactive. If you've got a question, just unmute yourself and jump in, interrupt me. I probably won't be reading the chat because I'm looking at my slides and they're on 2 different monitors. but make it fully interactive. Anytime you have a question, just jump in on it. So APRS, what is it? According to Bob Berninga, who developed it back in around 1992, over 30 years ago, unfortunately, he's a silent key now. It's a tactical real-time information sharing system using standard protocols. Well, those standard protocols, well, it was supported by several major manufacturers. Bob himself was a major spearhead at keeping Kenwood online. Yaesu developed their own APRS implementation, and Elenco supports it with an internal TNC. And there's a bunch more now on this list, whose names escape me at the moment. It's useful for both emergency operations and standard day-to-day operations. I track daily so that we know all of the RF infrastructure is still working for whenever we might actually need it to work in the event of a hurricane or anything else like that. I live on the east coast of Florida, so hurricanes are very much the top of my mind. And it's an example of a highly successful integration of RF and internet technologies. I move my head out of the way, and now ready to dive straight into the deep end. So what we're going to do is just kind of breeze through the protocols that underlie APRS, because a lot of the APRS constraints and restrictions are a direct result of what it's based on. It's based on AX25. That's a link access protocol for amateur radio that conforms to HDLC. There's a 100 or so page spec about it. And it's kind of like AX25 can be related to TCP/IP because AX25 has a connected mode of operation, which is very much like TCP protocol, for those of you familiar with internet stuff, and the UI, which is unnumbered information, which is kind of like UDP. You throw the packets onto the network and you don't know if they got there or not. That's what APRS uses. It uses the unnumbered information packets in the AX25 spec. So outside of APRS messaging, which we'll get to much later, all of the APRS packets are just transmitted, and the transmitter doesn't know if they ever got anywhere without looking elsewhere to see. Station IDs are part of the AX25 packet format. Call sign -SSID, which is the secondary station identifier, not the Wi-Fi's service set identifier. It's a 6-character call sign and 4 bits for an SSID. 4 bits. Oh, wow, binary. 2 to the 4th is 16. So we can have SSIDs going from 0 to 15, and that's all the AX25 protocol supports over the air. So that's why we have a constraint of 16 SSIDs numbered 0 through 15. For those of you that have seen APRS, you've probably never seen a -0, and that is by design. When you're using a -0, all of the user interfaces suppress the SSID and show it just as your base call sign. Another feature of AX25 that APRS is saddled with is it only has a checksum on the packets. It has no error correction information, none of the fancy stuff that we've got in all the contemporary digital modes. APRS has a checksum. So you either get the whole packet or you don't get the packet at all. AX25 also gives us the address path for routing packets. It's a destination, a source, and then repeaters, which we call the path. And this is actually what the frame construction looks like down there at the bottom of the slide. So when we put these packets into humanly readable format, it's called TNC2 format, named after the original TNC that communicated this way. We show it up as a source call greater than destination call, comma, path, comma, path, comma, path, comma, path, comma, path, colon, and then the payload. There's some example packets there on the slide, and you can see the source call is the call sign -SSID greater than a destination call sign, which has nothing to do with who the packet is sent to. And then the path, which is just a string together of a bunch of other components. And then the payload. Payloads can be position reports, including object reports. It can be telemetry and definitions of how to interpret that telemetry. It can be messages and the message acknowledgements, which is just another message. There can be weather reports on APRS. APRS stations can transmit their capabilities and their status, and you can query stations and they will respond with information. All of that is documented in APRS 101.pdf. So if you really want to know the insides of APRS, Google for APRS 101.pdf and be prepared to spend several nights with it under your pillow to fathom what all APRS can do, right down to the bits and bytes level. So that's the actual protocol, but over the air, we do it different. Over the air, we take that AX25 and on 2 meters and typically 70 centimeters, we transmit it as AFSK, audio frequency shift keying, at 1200 baud. So we got 1200 hertz tones and 2200 hertz tones, and you can hear what people call the packet racket when a packet transmits. If there were more traffic in Huntsville, I'd tell you to turn your radio on and tune it to 144.390, and you would probably hear a packet, but there's probably not enough packet activity in your area for you to reliably hear one. So I'm just going to put my radio here on 390 and turn the volume up a bit, and you might hear some packets come through. On HF, they use FSK, frequency shift keying, and they only do a 200 hertz separation between the mark and the space. And they only do 300 baud on HF. There's a movement, there was a movement, it's pretty much died out now, from Cross Country Wireless over in the UK to put APRS packets in their TNC2 form in PSK 63. So there were PSK 63 iGates out there and a client application called APRS Messenger. That was a packet. I don't know if that came through. Did it?
No.
No. Okay. I didn't think it would, but it was worth a try. Whisper. There is a format that you can put into your Whisper transmitters. Whispers is a very QRP transmitter kind of protocol and has location information in it. So they've gated Whisper packets to APRS as well. But all of that still doesn't have any error correction in the APRS side. It's mostly just checksums. You get all of a packet or you get none of the packet. Enter Direwolf, and the Direwolf author worked out a way to wrap the AX25 packet over the air, typically on 2 meters or 70 centimeters, the AFSK format, wrap it in an FX25 packet. Well, wrap it in forward error correction that he calls FX25. And the slides will have the link to how he does that. The nice thing about what he's done is it's fully backward compatible. So if some station is transmitting FX25, the AX25 packet is fully contained inside and is decoded by all the AX25 equipment. If you are doing FX25 with Direwolf, you get the benefit of the forward error correction. If you're not, all the AX25 still works. SCS Tracker is a DSP-based TNC, and it's called Robust Packet. They use it a lot on HF. It does bring forward error correction to APRS packets, but pretty much only on HF. They're very expensive units. And now there's a movement afoot to put LoRa, to put APRS over LoRa radios. And that's going to be interesting to see develop. They've got LoRa trackers running right now, but it's much more widespread in Europe than it is here in the United States. It's only beginning to show up here. So now we get to the infrastructure. We got the bits and the bytes. We got a protocol. We know that packets kind of look like the things down here at the bottom of this slide. And what actually moves this stuff around? We're going to introduce some terms here, like a digipeater. That's a digital repeater. Just like your voice repeater, but it does the digital packets. Unlike your voice repeater, which simultaneously transmits what it's receiving, a digipeater is receive and then transmit. So it's not full duplex. It's either receiving or it's transmitting, and when it's transmitting, it's not hearing anything. So it's a digital repeater, but with that time delay, receive and then transmit the packet. It does not do any store and forward. That's not exactly true. It does a minor amount of store and forward. If it receives 3 or 4 packets and the transmit channel is busy, it will buffer those up and transmit them, but not store and forward in the way we would ordinarily think of store and forward. There's fixed and mobile stations. You can have an APRS station here in your shack, or you can have APRS stations out in your mobile. And as some of you know, you can put APRS stations mobile on high altitude balloons and just let them float around the planet. It works really well for that. The simplex range is interesting because of only having that checksum and needing to get every bit perfectly in the packet. Simplex range for APRS is only about half of the range that you would get for FM voice, because our ears are really, really good at figuring out what was said in words, but we don't care if there's a couple of bits missing. We can figure out what the message was. APRS isn't that way. You drop a bit, you drop the packet. Digipeaters have something called a digipede duplicate detect to prevent it from repeating the same packet over and over again. For instance, if you were, if Chelsea was a digipeater and happened to be able to hear this W8AGT, if Chelsea transmits the packet and W8AGT transmits the packet back, you really don't want Chelsea to transmit the packet again because its coverage is already covered. So the digipeaters will detect the fact that I've already repeated this packet and they won't repeat it a second time. Enter the Kenwood D700 and D710, and they are actually almost broken in the fact that they will not digipeat a packet twice, but they will digipeat a packet that they originally transmitted. And this drove us crazy on the Appalachian Trail, the Golden Packet event, which I'll let Patrick fill you all in sometime about how that all works. Because we were seeing packets repeated that didn't make sense. And it turns out if a Kenwood D700, call it D7, transmits a packet, it's received by an uptrail digipeater who repeats it, and then the D7 hears that digipeated packet. He ignores the fact that it came from him originally, and he'll digipeat it once himself. So you end up with packets bouncing around in ways that you did not expect because of that feature. Technically, they're correct. They're not digipeating a packet twice, but you would also expect it not to digipeat a packet that it originated. And that's their hole in their firmware. Yaesu doesn't even have that problem because Yaesus don't do digipeating. So they don't have an issue with that. The Alinco TNCs didn't do digipeating. And as far as I know, anyone can jump in and correct me on this, but I don't think any of the other APRS radio implementations actually do digipeating except Kenwood. All the rest of the digipeating is done by external TNCs. There's a thing called UI flood and UI trace. We're going to ignore that for right now. But if you ever run into it, APRS typically works on UI trace. So just think we trace things, we don't flood things. Flooding sounds bad. Tracing is good. Tracing is what we normally do with APRS. So from the RF side, we've got digipeaters, we've got mobiles, fixed and mobile stations. We've got little houses here for the fixed stations, and we've got the things that look like cars and Jeeps and vans for mobile stations. They all digipeat packets around in the RF, and then the packets might make it to an internet gateway called an iGate. This is where the RF meets the internet. So on the internet side, iGates receive on the RF and feed APRS IS servers. I call IS the internet side. I don't know where it actually came from, but it's a loose connection of servers that run across the planet, all run by volunteers, ham volunteers. And everyone thinks the APRS IS network is smart. The APRS IS network is not smart. It is just a packet relay. A packet goes into an APRS IS server, it goes to all the other APRS IS servers, and it goes out to any connected client that has expressed an interest in that packet. And that's it. The packet's gone after that. Packet goes in, Packets rip around the globe, packets disappear. There's no buffering, there's no storage. And how many people have heard of APRS.FI? You don't have to raise your hand. I know you probably, most of you have heard of APRS.FI. APRS.FI is run by a volunteer person. His name is Jesus. He lives in Finland, hence the .fi. He has a database, but that database has nothing to do with APRS, nor the APRS-IS. It is simply a database that he runs that collects all the APRS packets from the internet, stores them into a nice database so that he can do those gorgeous maps with tracks, and you can watch high altitude balloons fly over, all from his website. But every now and again, he gets hit with tragedy of the commons, where too many people are looking at what he's doing, and he uses Google Maps. And Google Maps sometimes charges if you do too much Google Maps consumption from a single website. And he thankfully has some ham friends at Google that have gone to bat for him. But you may have noticed sometimes that APRS.FI's maps turn to OpenStreetMaps, and that is now an option at APRS.FI. That happens when too many people are looking at the APRS.FI maps, and he exceeds his free Google Maps quota. And he just switches the whole site over to OpenStreetMaps so that at least it can continue to run and not cost him literally hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per month just in Google Maps charges because of the popularity of his site. We thank Jesus for all of his efforts on that. Findyou.com is another one. I think I have a list of these coming up in a little bit. So it's all real time. There's no buffering, no storage. And the APRS-IS does duplicate suppression, more duplicate suppression than what the digipeaters do. Only the first copy of any given packet is distributed across the APRS-IS. There's a lot of people that think they can do RF coverage analysis using the APRS-IS. It does not work because the first packet gets distributed through the IS, and all those digipeated packets that are going from digipeater to I-gates and are fanning out in a giant circle around the originating station, only one copy of that packet gets to the internet, and that's all the rest of the planet gets to see. So if anyone says they're looking at the APRS-IS and trying to figure out why their I-gate's not working, or why their digipeater doesn't have the coverage that they want it to have, and why is their I-gate not gating any packets, probably because there's an I-gate closer to the source of those packets, and they get to gate the first copy, and the ones you're copying won't show up on the internet. I-gates have one other major function, and that's when it comes to APRS messaging. Yes, you can send messages, short messages, text messages over APRS, and the I-gate is responsible for gating those messages from the internet back onto the local RF. And you think, wait, no, the internet is how fast? And we're talking 1200 baud on the RF side? We can't do that. Well, yes, you can, because it's only going to gate to the RF side messages that are addressed to stations that were recently heard local to that I-gate on RF. So all the stuff ripping around the internet, the I-gate's never going to put it out to the RF locally unless one of those messages is addressed to somebody on the local RF. And as a great benefit, if any message gets gated to a local station, then the next position report from the source station of that message also gates to the local RF so that the message recipient can have a clue where the message sender is actually located on the planet. And this is something that really throws APRS newbies a little bit for a loop. When they first get on the air and there might be some messaging going on, especially on Thursdays UTC, and I'll get into why that's an important date for APRS. They're sitting there, they're looking at their RF mobile screens and APRS, and all of a sudden they're being told that they received a position report from a station that's 1,500 miles away on the RF. And they're like, how did I get this? This guy's in Australia and I'm in Florida. How did I get his position report on my local RF? Well, he probably sent a message to somebody here in Florida, and his next position report also comes out on my local RF here in Florida. So that's why you can see position reports from stations that you wonder how in the world they got there via RF. They probably came out through an iGate on the tail of a message. So again, if anybody has any questions, just unmute and jump in and yell. APRS on the web. There's a whole bunch of sites, far more than this. If you just Google APRS, you'll get good information, bad information, old information, new information. It's a real hodgepodge. APRS.org, that is Bob Bruninga's original specification site. It is still online. It will eventually be adopted by somebody, hopefully the APRS Foundation, that is being formed to step in where Bob has left the vacuum when he passed away from us. APRS.fi, I just happened to put the N8DEU-7. You can go straight to a station if you use that form for the URL. It is arguably the most user-friendly website out there and the most useful website for anybody to look at information coming from APRS. APRS Direct is another map-based site. Find You used to have maps. He no longer has maps, but there is archived APRS data available from Find You. APRSISCE.wikidot.com is my own APRS client. There's a shameless plug there. And atgoldenpacket.net is where you can read about the Appalachian Trail Golden Packet. That is an APRS event that we have annually where we spread 16 stations this year on peaks zigzagging across the Appalachian Trail from Georgia, Springer Mountain in Georgia, the whole way to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And we send an APRS packet, APRS packets, plural, or attempt to, on a digipeater chain through 15 digipeters from Maine to Georgia and back again. It's a really exciting event. If you're into APRS, we can actually work out side trails. At one point early on, there was a Huntsville station that was able to copy Klingman's Dome, which is the second station on the south end for the Golden Packet event. And Patrick can tell you about Golden Packet because he was at Springer Mountain the second year that the Golden Packet event ever happened. So how do we get started? Enough about all those details, unless anyone has any questions about those details. Hearing none, I'll dive in. First thing you need to choose to get started is you need to have a call sign -SSID. If you only have one APRS instance, just use -0. You never have to tell anything -0, you just tell it your call sign. Otherwise, there's a recommendation set for what to choose as an SSID. There's path recommendations, and you will need an APRS-IS passcode, which is not a password, and it is not great security, but we'll talk about that here shortly. Up to a 6-character call sign. Remember that AX25 protocol that we're using? That's where a 6-character call sign limit comes from for APRS. That was almost a concern because for about a 6-month interval, Australia was actually authorizing 7-character ham call signs. Licensed operators with 7-character call signs. The only thing that saved APRS was the fact that they were not in their license rules, they were not allowed to transmit APRS. They were only allowed to do voice. So we dodged a bullet, and then I Googled this just a couple of weeks ago, and apparently Australia recanted on that, and they're back to doing 6-character call signs again and fitting in with the rest of the world. A 2 alphanumeric SSID. Alpha I have there in parentheses for a reason. -0, you always express that as just the call sign. So KJ4ERJ-0 would actually be KJ4ERJ, unless, stepping away here so I can remind myself what it's called. Unless you happen to have an Anytone. If you have an Anytone radio that does APRS internally, their firmware hasn't quite caught up with the fact that they're supposed to suppress the -0s, and -0s will show up on their display, and it will break their messaging because when they send a message to a base call sign, they send it out as -0, and nothing on the planet ever expects to see the -0, and their messaging doesn't work. to just base call signs. Works perfectly fine if you send it to things like KJ4ERJ-1. Works gorgeously. 0 through 15, inclusive, that's required for RF AX25 usage on 2 meters, 70 centimeters. -XX, bringing in the alphanumerics, anything goes on the internet side. So if you're bringing up an APRS client on the internet that will never directly connect to RF, you can use -XX where XX is anything you want it to be. I have things -IS, -AP, -E1, -E2, -E3. I've got a whole set of these things. But there's a gotcha there. You can send messages from a -XX station through an iGate onto RF, because the iGate is going to wrap that into what's called a third-party packet, and your call sign with the alphanumeric SSID will never actually be in the AX25 header. It will be in the AX25 payload. And that works gorgeously fine when talking to Kenwood radios and many other APRS radios, except Yaesu. Yaesu's RF implementation cannot do APRS messaging with non-AX25 SSIDs. There's nothing in the spec that says it has to be an AX25 SSID, but Yaesu's implementation only handles the suppressed 0, at least they got that right, -1 through -15. So if you're going to be doing messaging to Yaesu radios, make sure your internet side station has an AX25 compatible SSID. And this next point is critical. I just had a guy on Facebook complaining about his APRS FI map because it was ping-ponging between his house and where he was driving around. Every concurrently operating thing needs a unique SSID. It doesn't matter if we're talking hardware or if we're talking software, if we're talking firmware, if we're talking tin cans and a string. It has to have a unique SSID. What this guy did, he had a Yaesu APRS radio and a Kenwood APRS radio, and he made them both the same SSID. He left one sit at his house turned on while he went mobile with the other one. So it looked like one station was at his house. No, it's over here. No, it's back at his house. No, it's over here. No, it's back at his house. It will drive you crazy if you duplicate SSIDs on different things. Diagnosing problems becomes nearly impossible. So definitely, as you're setting things up, keep a list of what SSIDs you're using, where you're using them, and make sure you don't duplicate them. Or don't call me. So what are the recommendations for SSIDs? There they are. These are strictly recommendations. They are not hard and fast. There's no SSID police. Nobody's going to come down on you and say, no, you're not allowed to use -13. That's for a weather station. No, because I happen to use -12 on all of my phone devices, even though that's supposed to be DTMF, RFID devices, one-way trackers, and APRS touchtone. I like -12. There is a pretty strong standard that your primary first APRS mobile station gets the -9. So that's about the only one that is pretty globally accepted. And the -0, which is suppressed, is usually your base station. So KJ4ERJ is my home station on the internet. Every now and again, it gets connected to RF, fixed station, message capable, all that really nice stuff. -7s for HTs, also another real popular one. The rest of them, take it with a grain of salt. If you see a -13, it may or may not be weather, for instance. Additional SSIDs. On the internet-only side, there's a recommendation that if you're doing the PSK63 HF with APRS Messenger, that you make it a -63 SSID. If you're doing touchtone, you put a -TT as your SSID. RFID, we did some work with RFID tags at fixed stations and actually gating those into position reports on APRS. We use -ID for those. D-Star repeaters actually put their information on the APRS with a -A through -Z. So if you ever see those on the map and you wonder, why is that A not quite touching the dash? That's because there's a space in there. And it took me a while to figure that out when I was first getting started in APRS. I'm looking at this, where are these things coming from? Why do they have an embedded space in this thing? It's all the D-Star guys. And some APRS IS servers will not pass SSIDs greater than 2 characters. So if you happen to have a call sign that's less than 6 and you want to put a -3 characters or -4 characters, it may or may not work. Because Java APRS serve definitely does not pass things like AF4Z-XYZY. It's not going to make it through the internet side, and you'll go nuts trying to figure out why it didn't, because it just silently drops. Yeah, I suspect 578s have the same issue as the 878. Same firmware authors. That's on the Anytones, and that came out of the chat. Here's a sample of some of my SSIDs. Needless to say, I like APRS. I do have, most of these are actually still online. They come and go. The -E's are ESP8266s, a little IoT controller chip, Wi-Fi controller chip. They do temperature monitoring around my house and report it via APRS telemetry. You can look up KJ4ERJ-E1 at aprs.fi and look at the telemetry graphs, and you'll either see my air conditioner temperatures, my refrigerator temperatures, or the water heater temperature in my master bath. Why? Hey, when all I have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I know APRS. I know aprs.fi will give me telemetry graphs for free. All I have to do is transmit telemetry packets. So I transmit telemetry packets. At one point, I actually was able to send specially crafted APRS messages with one-time passwords and remotely trigger a relay connected to my home server to force a reboot of my home server via APRS. Because it had a proximity sensor, I swear, every time I was more than 50 miles away, the server would lock up. So I finally fixed it. I put a relay on it with APRS. It's no longer there. Thankfully, my server is better behaved than it used to be. Paths and alias. This is another one. You're going to see all kinds of information on the internet about what path you should use for your APRS station. The path is just a service request for digipeaters. Just think of it as that. It's a service request for digipeaters. The one, if you see any mentions on the internet that says relay or wide, don't listen to it. That's obsolete information. It's been obsolete for 20 years. So if you see something that's saying put relay, comma, wide, wide, don't do it. Just, it's all obsolete. What you want to do are the ones here in green. Wide N-N is the new paradigm. If you are a mobile in a good APRS coverage area, wide 1.1, comma, wide 2.1. That's what you want to use as your path. It gives you 2 digipeater hops, the first one being either a low altitude fill-in digi, that's the wide 1, or a high altitude wide area digi, because they answer to wide 1 and wide 2. So the wide 1.1, wide 2.1 will get you 2 big hops, or it'll get you 1 little hop and then 1 big hop. Perfect for mobile operation when you're in a good APRS coverage area. If you're going over the road, you might be getting further afield, further away from the digipeaters, further out from the eye gates. You might want to increase that to wide 1.1, wide 2.2. That gives you 1 local hop or 1 wide hop, and then 2 wide hops beyond that. You can get further with that. My son in Orlando should be running wide 2.1, wide 1.1, wide 2.1. He runs wide 1.1, wide 2.2, which is why when I'm down in Miami, I can sometimes pick his packets up over RF, because he did digipeater hops from Orlando the whole way down to Miami. Remember, Florida's flat. Our high altitude digipeaters might be 60 feet up. So we don't have the kind of coverage that you have in the mountains out. Does Huntsville have mountains? Somebody say yes or no.
Yes, we have some mountains, especially east of town.
Okay, so you do have some decent coverage potential for APRS.
Yeah, that eye gate up on top of the mountain has a lot of coverage.
Excellent, excellent. A special path that I have not really seen anybody use, but it's documented. It's a fact. There's digipeaters on the planet that use it, is the SSNN. It gives you statewide coverage. The wide alias goes through all the digipeaters, no matter where you are. It works here in Florida. It works in California. It works in Europe. It works everywhere. SSNN is something unique to the United States, and it gives you statewide coverage. A digipeater in Florida, Florida's actually split into North and South Florida, can be set up so that it only responds to NFL 2-1 or NFL 3-1, and digipeaters in Georgia are only going to respond to GANN, and in Alabama it would be ALNN. If you set your systems up for that, especially fixed stations like our Polk County Emergency Management has weather stations, they should really be using the FL alias in their digipeater path, but they're not. If they use the FL digipeater path, then if their packets manage to hop up to the Florida line, they would not further hop into Georgia because the Georgia digipeaters would ignore them. So that's what the state aliases are for. Like I said, I actually put a filter on it for Alabama, and I think I saw one station in Alabama that actually had AL 2-1 in their path, but they had it after a wide 2-1, which means it really wouldn't work because it probably hopped out of Alabama before it got used up to be processing the Alabama piece. That's, again, getting much deeper into than where we need to be for this talk. Hop 77 is a special one. It gives you 7 hops on digipeaters configured for the hop alias. That's what we use on the golden packet event, except we actually use a hop 77, hop 77. In your path, you can actually configure an explicit call sign SSID for a digipeater. So if you know you are in range of, in my case, WX4MLB-3 is our local digipeater up at the National Weather Service office, I could just make my path be WX4MLB-3, wide 2-1. That way, only my local digipeater would act on it first, and then he would retransmit it and get me one other hop out beyond him. There's a danger with doing that because if that digipeater is down, your packets are not going to be repeated by anybody. So you're much better off sticking with the wide paths. And I don't think I mentioned it. If you're doing a fixed station, you probably are just as good antenna-wise as the fill-in digi, the wide 1 digis. So you would actually just use a path of wide 2-1. Your first digipeater will pick you up and carry you further out, and that's all you typically need from a fixed station. So that's paths. The green ones are the ones you want to use for your RF setup. Passcodes. You only need a passcode for the APRS IS. You do not need a passcode if you're only going to be doing APRS on RF. The passcode is mathematically computed from your call sign. It is not something stored in a database anywhere. It's computed. But from the APRS IS specification, it's the responsibility of each software author to provide proper passcode for their individual users on a request basis. Because remember, if I'm on the internet side and I send a message to an RF station somewhere on the planet, there is an iGate somewhere that is going to take my message text and put it on the air. And if my message text contains words or expressions that are not legal to be transmitted, I'm actually putting the iGate operator license at risk. So if you need a passcode, send an email to that email address, passcode@homeside.to, and I'll be glad to give, I or one of my helpers will send you the passcode for your call sign. If you Google APRS passcode, you will find websites that contain passcode generators. Everyone on this call is a ham. I personally don't care if you use one of those sites to get your own passcode. They will give you the proper passcode. There's no magic to it. It's the source code for generating the passcode is in the public domain. It's in the source code disaster. So it's very insecure. But please don't encourage the use of those sites for non-hams, because you can literally generate a passcode for anything at those sites, and those sites to have nobody looking over their shoulder to see if that thing even remotely looks like it's actually a ham. So you have people pirating call signs by having their actual passcode because it's not secure. So don't worry about using them, but don't encourage their use outside of actual amateur radio operators. I wish we could take them down, but that's impossible. What kind of hardware do we have to play with? There's APRS capable integrated radios, there's integrated trackers, there's terminal node controllers, and sound card modems. So we're going to kind of blow through these quickly. There's a picture of the radios. We have radios from Kenwood. They're D7, D72, D74, D75 HTs are all APRS radios. This is a D74. If I can get it not to clip it out, that's a D74 with my little thin wire that goes out to my outside antenna. D74 is nice, it does Bluetooth. The D75 has been announced. There is a new APRS radio coming from Kenwood, which is important because the D74 is out of production, as are the D700s, the D710s, and the D710Gs are all out of production because they can no longer buy the parts to build them. We keep hoping for a new mobile APRS radio from Kenwood. Don't know if it'll be coming or not. Yaesu has a whole line of them. Their HT line goes up through the FT5DR now. If you're happy with just what the radio does for APRS, Yaesu has a really great line. The Kenwood radios, on the other hand, give you access to the internal APRS functionality from connected PCs and, in the case of Bluetooth, connected cell phones. So you can use your Kenwood APRS radios as an APRS interface to RF for other devices. The Yaesu radios, only what the radio does is it going to be able to do. The Yaesu mobiles, the FTM 100, 350, and 400s, they do have a way that you can get the packets that they've received out of them into a computer, but you cannot transmit through the Yaesu mobiles. Alinco has an embedded TNC for their DR135 radios, and I tried to update this slide for all the new ones like the Anytone, and there's like 3 or 4 other manufactured Chinese knockoffs that are doing APRS radios. I've not been real impressed, and I actually helped work out the kinks, the worst kinks of the Anytone firmware, but it's still not the world's best APRS implementation. There are integrated trackers and iGates. Sonic makes an AP510. I don't even know if that's still on the market. Bionics has their Tiny Track 4, their MTT4B, which is Bluetooth transceiver. Microsat has a really nice one. There's several other integrated tracker iGates that are coming around now. There's Microsat's the one that we had on the trail this year. AX25 modems, which is strictly a modulator demodular, not a full terminal node controller. A little bit of a distinction there. Modems simply do the modulation. They do the AFSK 12 and 2200 hertz tones for the bits, but there's no intelligence in them. They rely on whatever's connected to them to do the intelligence. MobileLink makes a nice Bluetooth linked one. Bionics has their Tiny Track line for that. Argent Data has the Tracker 3 family, although I just went out to try to buy an Open Tracker 3, and it looks like they are no longer on the market, which I'm disappointed because the Tracker 3 was a really nice modem. The TNC, on the other hand, is where packet meets APRS. Remember back at the beginning, I said AX25 has a connected mode and an unnumbered UI, whatever UI stands for. The connected mode is traditional packet for anyone that's heard of packet. That's what WinLink uses, is connected packet in some cases. No, that UI is not user interface in the case of AX25. It's unnumbered something. It's like the UDP of AX25. So TNCs have the actual connected intelligence built into the TNC itself. So you can actually connect to a TNC with a serial terminal emulator, tell the TNC you want to connect to another station and tell it to connect to another station. When we first got into this, my son sat here on the east coast of Florida and connected through the Sedan packet network, hop to hop to hop to hop, and ended up talking to the Sedan node in Tallahassee over in the Panhandle. I think it was 6 or 7 hops he had to go through, and they all had to work, but he successfully, over the course of about 3 hours one evening, managed to do a full packet connection from here to Tallahassee. Kenwood's internal TNCs have packet capability, except for the D74, and I suspect the D75 will also no longer have the internal TNC. They just have an internal modem. There may be others in the TNC line. These are the only ones I've ever been able to find. Darwolf, yes, Darwolf now actually supports connected packet operation in addition to the APRS operation in Darwolf. We'll find out what Darwolf is right here. Sound card modems, this is what you put on your PC, hook up a sound card interface to your radio, and let your PNC do let your PC do all of the tone work. It'll do the encoding of the tones and transmitting, and it'll do the decoding. AGW's Packet Engine Pro did it. It was one of the original ones, SV2 AGW. UZ7HO has a sound modem. Personal opinion here, Darwolf has them beat in spades. Darwolf is decoded information from radio emissions for Windows or Linux fans. I finally found out where Darwolf came from, and it just sounds like an acronym that was made up after it was named. But you can download it. It works on Windows, works on Linux, works on the Raspberry Pi. It will work on an Apple as well. It has local monitor capability, so you can actually watch the packets as they're coming in. It's got built-in digipeater functionality. It's a touch tone gateway. It has a built-in iGate, so that you could have this one piece of software running on your PC and do it all. It has a virtual TNC for APRS clients, so APRS clients can use its connected mode operation. It does not have a command line interface, unlike the Cantronics TNC. It does, this is the coolest one, it does multiple concurrent decoders with offsets. So when Darwolf is decoding, it is actually interpreting 6 or 7 different times the same audio signal and trying to dig the packet out of it. It has better decoding capability than any hardware TNC that has ever been around. And he's added the FX25 forward error correction into it when you're talking to another station that also has FX25 capability. So Darwolf just rocks. We built a Pi-based appliance for what Raspberry Pis can we run Darwolf on? It works from the Pi 3.5, the Pi 02W, works fine at 1200 baud. 9600 baud needs a Pi 4. The Pi 3.5 and the Pi 02W CPU can't keep up with the decoding of 9600 baud. So great question. We use an appliance on the Appalachian Trail Golden Packet event now that is Pi-based and Darwolf inside there. The tracker I have in my wife's van is actually a Pi 3.5, Bluetooth enabled. So it is its own tracker running through an Alinco radio. And when I want to, I just pair my cell phone to it, and I have a mobile iGate where my cell phone is an interface to the RF station driving around as KJ4OVQ-9. Not necessarily true, Hank. I'll get back to the high altitude balloons here shortly. Some of the uses, tracking, obviously. Public service events like supporting bicycle events, all those things can dramatically reduce the load on the voice repeater by the net control being able to bring up an APRS map and know where all of his support vehicles are. No longer do you hear on the radio, so SAG-3, where are you right now? He knows it on the map. And he just calls SAG-3 and says, I need you to go to this intersection, pick up a biker, whatever he needs the thing to do. You can use APRS tracking to meet your spouse for dinner. This is an actual fact. I was uptown. I knew my wife was uptown. I knew she was tracking. I looked at where she was come dinner time, and I sent her a message that showed up on her GPS in the van via APRS. I said, meet for dinner. And she sent back from that GPS, yes. And I said, mall question mark? And she said, yes. And we watched on the map as our two vehicles converged on the mall and we met for dinner. So really does work. Won't talk about road tripping to Dayton or off-roading in the compound. There's a local information initiative that lets you put repeater objects onto RF so that people visiting your area can know what your repeaters are, and they don't have to sit there and scan for repeaters. Your N8DEU7 iGate digipeater is actually putting these three, figure out which way to move, these three repeaters objects onto the APRS network. He's putting those onto RF. His actual packets include the tone information, relative range, and when nets might be meeting on those local repeaters. There is a problem with those. You'll notice my APRS IS32 map has red squares around them because they're not fully compliant frequency objects that he's putting onto APRS. I don't know if N8DEU is on the call or if any of you know N8DEU, but he really needs to go back and look at the frequency specification for APRS, and he's supposed to have each one of these packet bodies is supposed to start with the full 6-digit frequency with the decimal point and a case sensitive capital M, capital H, lowercase z. That is important because Yaesu is case sensitive on parsing the frequency information. What this frequency specification lets radios do on APRS, Yaesu does this and Kenwood does this. When it receives a packet that has frequency information, there's a button on your radio that says tune. You hit the tune button and it takes the frequency that came in on the APRS side of the radio and sets the VFO on the voice side of the radio to that frequency with that tone, and you can immediately bring up a voice QSO with whoever sent their frequency information. On top of that, the radios have the ability to take the voice side of the radio's frequency information and automatically put it into that station's packet. So not only would you be able to tune to these repeaters if you receive them, you could tune directly into somebody that is broadcasting a 146.520 simplex frequency, for instance. And yes, Patrick reminded me the other use of tracking is APRS tag. And that's when you have enough APRS users in your neighborhood. When you see one of them beaconing, you can drive by where their car is parked and stick a little note on their windshield and say APRS tag, because you saw where they were on APRS and you tagged them, and they can tag you whenever they see your car parked. Or in the case of, I forget Thomas's call sign. I'm stuck in traffic over here on one of our popular streets at rush hour. And next thing I know, somebody's knocking on my window. It's Thomas, who is a local ham, and he's in the Jeep, 4 cars behind me, and he's watching me on APRS. He runs up, knocks on my window, says, tag, and then runs back to his car. So you can play tag with APRS. It's great. Yeah, he's no longer WI8H, and he's not W4SGC. That's Josh. He's got, anyway, I think he has CQ in his name, in his call sign now. He still drives the Jeep, not the same Jeep, but a different Jeep. Yeah, there's your POTA information on your Kenwood, great use for it. Text messaging totally rocks on APRS. And this is where Thursdays come up, almost. Text messaging, you can send directed text messages to any station. There are information services on the internet called QRZ or Who-IS or Who-15 or SatServe. Yes, from APRS on your radio, you can send a message to ISS. And the body of the message can be anything you want. And there's an internet-based service that will send back to you an APRS message containing when the next pass of the ISS should be visible at your station's last beaconed location. So you could be sitting in a parking lot bored waiting for your wife or your YL or for whoever, and just send a message to ISS and say X, and it will come back and say, oh, you've got an ISS pass coming up in 5 minutes. It's going to start in the northeast. It's going to peak at 45 degrees above the horizon, and it's going to set in the southwest. And now, okay, I can just tune my APRS radio to the ISS frequency, and I can actually work APRS over the ISS because I knew it was going to be up there. That's APRS messaging. There's an ISS object that is inserted by the SAT server. So if you are on the internet side, this does not work at aprs.fi, so don't try it. I'll get back to you, Michael, on that question. That's a really good one. If you are on the internet side and you put a filter in and say, I want to look at the object/ISS asterisk, you will actually see the current position of the ISS as it flies around the planet. I have a server here that is injecting that object into the APRS-IS, and WB8ELK in Michigan is actually picking up that object and repeating it onto APRS on HF every time it beacons. So anywhere that you're around, you can see where the ISS is, and the green circle that some APRS clients will put around the ISS object is actually the anticipated RF footprint of the ISS as it goes over for its APRS stuff. And yes, Michael, to communicate, to digipeat through the ISS, you do have to change your path. It does not respond to the wide paths because otherwise it would be totally saturated with all of the APRS packets of anyone that tuned onto its frequency. But you just change your path to be ARISS, literally, amateur radio on the ISS, ARISS. Make that your path, and that will actually request the service of the ISS digipeater for that packet. And I'm not even going to guess what the satellite frequency is for APRS on the ISS, but I want to say it's 145.825. You can Google it. APRS frequency ISS, and it'll tell you what frequency you need to be on to do APRS via the ISS. AN server is a group. Thank you. I was close. Thank you. In the chat, it has the frequency for the ISS for anyone that doesn't know what I'm saying. Thank you for. AN server and CQ server is an internet-based chat room of sorts for APRS. You send a message to AN server, specially crafted in its body, and you can join a chat group. And a group on Instagram decided that they could start an APRS messaging net on Thursdays. So on Thursdays, you can send a message via ANSRVR, and I have a typo in the slide there, to the HOTG group. HOTG stands for Hams on the Gram, because they started on Instagram. You send a message to AN Server's HOTG group, and it will go out to all the people that are signed up to the HOTG group on Thursdays UTC, just to keep it fair for the entire planet. And literally hundreds of people are checking into this APRS net every Thursday. They had a push one couple of weeks to see how many they could get on a given Thursday, and they did crack 500 check-ins on the APRS AN Server HOTG group on a 24-hour Thursday period. Once you sign up, you will get the check-ins messages from everyone else checking into the HOTG group for the next 12 hours. So if you really want to shake down your APRS messaging and see if you have a bidirectional iGate, Thursdays in the HOTG group is the place to go. Patrick, I guessed where you were based on your registered address at the FCC. And I was hoping one of those weather stations would be yours, but it doesn't look like they are because it's not where you are.
Yeah, sorry to disappoint. I still need to get my weather station up on up on APRS.
Well, you could at least put it on CWAP and we would see you.
I know it's it being a meteorologist, I'm definitely way behind. Need to get that done.
I do have a nice Tempest up now, by the way. Thank you for recommending those to Paul.
Oh, yes. I highly recommend anybody who's looking for a really good, affordable weather station. The WeatherFlow Tempest is very, very good.
Except I'm still trying to figure out how to interface it to APRS. I've only had mine up for about a month now.
So that's funny. I was a beta tester for them, and one of my pieces of feedback was you should get an APRS integration for this. And they said, yeah, we're going to try to work on that, but I don't know if they ever really got around to it.
There is a way.
Oh, I know there is. I found it. I just haven't pursued it yet.
Yeah, it's a Windows application called Weather Display.
Yep.
Cool.
So you can get all the weather information. In this case, I'm actually connected to the FireNet network, which is bigger than it carries more data than the APRS IS network, but is 100% compatible. So you get to see all the Citizens Weather Observer Program, the CWAP weather things that are not necessarily hams, in addition to seeing all the hams, and you get to see water flow. That's what that little HTO symbol is in the upper right-hand corner of that map. It's actually a flow sensor on local rivers and streams. That information is available via APRS on the FireNet servers. FireNet servers also carry lightning strikes across the planet, compliments of me, and Blitzortung, if anyone's heard of Blitzortung. And you can also see earthquakes on FireNet via APRS. So all kinds of things are available on APRS, and I know your ears are probably melting down. National Weather Service alerts are on APRS. This happened to be a really active time in December of 2016, all the highlighted alerts. The only alerts you will see on the APRS, though, are those that are potentially life-threatening as determined by the National Weather Service. So there's a whole thing. People complained because there was a time in the past that other things were showing up on APRS, but it was actually overwhelming the network. So when that site went offline, Pete Lovell, who picked it up, AE5PL, now only puts out those that the National Weather Service considers potentially life-threatening. But they're really good to see when they show up on your map. FireNet, on the other hand, you can get all the rest of the National Weather Service alerts if you really want to see everything else that FireNet throws at you. But this is an important note. If you're operating an iGate, it should be connected to the APRS IS proper and not to firenet.us. Firenet.us looks like the APRS IS. It looks like it has all the traffic of the APRS IS, but it does not do the message gating feature for connected clients. Only the primary APRS IS does that. So if you are tempted to put FireNet on your iGate, don't do it. FireNet on a client is great. I'm not going to talk about my APZs, but yes, APZ is the experimental tag for APRS packets. And I have some experimental packets like APZ Mow, which was my son's remote controlled lawnmower, and APZ Lua are my temperature sensors here. APZ TED is actually off the air now. And I noticed N8DEU7 is actually APZWX. Does anybody know what software he's running on that iGate Digi?
No idea, Lynn.
I was really hoping he would be here to answer that question for me. But he looks like he's got quite a nice install up there.
He does. Yeah, I've only met him once, so I can try to get in touch with him and see what's going on.
Yeah, I would love that if you can. So let me roll back here in the chat a little bit. The footnote about APRS on around the world Mylar party balloons. They rarely do APRS. That's not 100% true, but Whisper is pretty universal because they can do Whisper in a really, really light form factor on those Mylar balloons. And the UK is an interesting twist. Yes, you're not supposed to transmit from balloons over the UK, but not only that, one of the issues with doing 2 meter or 70 centimeter APRS on the planet is the frequencies change. Here in the United States, it is 144.390. That's the only thing you need to know about APRS in the United States. Anywhere you go in the States, 144.390 is going to have a 1200 baud AX25 support if it's going to have anything. But when you go over to Europe, it's 144.800, I believe it is. And these balloons used to launch before they actually got it perfected and light enough payloads to make it across the Atlantic. They never worried about it. But there are now 4 high altitude balloons, frequency agile, geofenced APRS transmitters that detect what country they're over and will either shut up if they're over the UK or other countries where they're not allowed to transmit, or they will change to the frequency of the local APRS infrastructure, just so they will track. And it's really cool. The latex balloons, yeah, they're up, pop, fall. They use nice 2 meter normal APRS. The main thing, if you're ever supporting a balloon event, a balloon launch, you really don't want any path whatsoever when you get up above 10,000 feet or so. So you really want a balloon tracker that lets you modify the path based on altitude, because when you are at 10,000 feet, you have a bigger RF footprint than the best digipeater on the ground. So why would you be asking for digipeaters on the ground to help you if you've got a bigger footprint than they are? Especially when, if you ask for that help and you're up at 80,000 feet, your footprint is now hundreds of miles across, and every single digipeater underneath you will be digipeating your packets all at the same time. And high altitude balloons have been known to shut down local RF infrastructures for APRS for a couple of hours until they finally pop and come down and get quiet. So if you do no path, the eye gates will copy you directly. You have the line of sight to hundreds of eye gates within the balloon's footprint. You want to bring the path back on when you get below 10,000 feet to assist you with the recovery. Because when you're back down there, you need those digipeaters to help your packets get out. And then, yes, on Patrick's comment back at 811 on the ISS network is, if you've got power enough to power your APRS stuff, and you happen to have something that will tell you when the ISS is going to be overhead, you can send messages via, not messages, you can put in your beacon comment. Messaging through the ISS is frowned upon because ACs don't tend to be able to get back. So you just put in your packet comment what you want the message out. And there are people that do actively work nearly every ISS path, and they will be reading your comments. And if your comment is, please call this phone number and say I'm all right, in shorter words than that, hopefully, it has a really good chance of actually being done. And KC10CA. Yeah, so you do the ISS work, Michael? Michael might not be on here anymore. I don't see him. I think I talked too long.
He just messaged and said it's a blast. I don't know if his maybe audio unmute isn't working or something.
Okay, good. So yeah, he's offering, if you want to try ISS work, KC10CA will help you out. So any other questions outside of what was in the chat? Because one of my philosophies, oh wait, there's more. I didn't scroll down. Is creating a new information service as straightforward as listening for an address in APRS messages and responding to it? Yes, it is. It is that simple. Finding a unique target, and there's a nice filter for you now, by the way. It's the G filter for group message. So you could actually use an APRS IS filter of G/ whatever the message is you want to listen to. In the case of my SAT serve, of course, I'm listening to every message on the global APRS network, IS network, and then checking to see if any of them match any of the satellite names from the amateur radioactive satellite TLEs from NASA. And there's the link to the weather display. So let me pop that before I lose the chat. And W5KUB. He's a balloon operator, I gather, Michael. And I think, weren't the ham folks the high altitude balloon folks planning on having a conference there in Huntsville? I think they were.
I haven't heard about it, but I would want to go. I should probably ask around.
Yeah, I'm on one of the HAB mailing lists, and I think they were talking about Huntsville for this year, but I don't know that for sure. And that's all I had. So any other questions? Do you have to join a group or modify the path to direct a message to another? No, you do not. For APRS IS messaging, as long as you are both within range of a transmit capable iGate, you just, from your radio, address the call sign -SSID of the other ham, no matter where they are on the planet, or even if they're on the internet directly, and poke transmit.
That's a good song.
Pardon me?
Right?
Sorry. Hi. Yeah, this is Mike. I put the question. I'm KD2UWR about
Okay.
the path. I'll just add a little more specific, something I was stuck on. So I have a ham friend in Chile that I was also interested in APRS, and we can message each other. You know, I use APRS Droid on my phone to the mobile link to UV5R radio, and he uses LoRa on his side. We can message each other, but only when we join the ANS SVR for the APRS Thursday. So like when we join that, we can message each other, but outside of joining that, we cannot direct message each other. And I didn't know if it was something with the path or something we're doing wrong.
Not something with the path. An AN server is just a reflector. It doesn't do anything fancy. When you send a message to AN server's HOTG group, it actually turns around and spoofs your message content as if it came from your call sign SSID, and it addresses it to everybody that's currently a group member. So if he gets your message through the HOTG check-in, he should get your message direct.
Okay, I'll try experimenting more. Could be something on his side too.
Yeah, and the same goes true. I mean, if he can send an HOTG check-in that you receive, then he should be able to send directly to you. The AN server is really, really a brain dead thing.
Yeah. As long as we're on the AN server, we can all day long we can direct message each other.
Right.
But then at the next day, they don't go through.
Wow. Okay.
So it should have nothing to do with my wide 1.1 or wide 2.1. Like just leave.
No,
because-
that's only your path to get to the iGate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll keep experimenting.
Now there is one gotcha. Remember, iGates, and I'm sure the LoRa gates work the same way, are only going to gate messages from the internet to the local RF if they recently heard that station locally.
You done?
Oh, maybe that's why.
So if you have not beaconed a position report, or if he has not beaconed a position report, then the packet's not going to go through. But when you send the message to AN server, you've now shown up locally on the local RF, and it will start gating messages back out to you. So you can't send a message to somebody that's not active, because his local iGate is not going to gate the message, because it's not going to know he's there unless it has heard them recently. And recently in that case is usually 30 minutes. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Great question. Anything else? Because one of my philosophies is there's no such thing as a stupid question unless you've asked it before and expect a different answer. Hearing none. So a big thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry. You can tell I'm long-winded. I'm passionate about APRS. And I always have more slides than I have time for.
Thanks, Lynn.
So much, Lynn. Yeah, this was really great. Really enjoyed it. Maybe a question for Jeff is, can we get access to the meeting chat?
Sure. You got your checkbook? Yes, of course.
Oh, hey, actually, wait, I just saw a save chat feature.
Yeah, I'm gonna post the video, and then what I'll do is I'll put the chat in the body of the YouTube video post.
Awesome. That's great. And thanks very much, Jeff, for providing the Zoom extended Zoom thing here. This is really great.
Yeah, I'm also curious. You guys may see that there's this Fathom note taker attendee in the meeting. So this is the second product I've been testing that uses AI to dictate or transcribe the call. So if it's as good as the other one that I've been testing, you should actually have a pretty exact transcription of this.
That's great. Very cool. All right.
One of the not so frightening things about AI.
All right. Well, I think we're good. Thanks, Lynn. Really appreciate it. And we need to try to get some of the guys together here in Huntsville, maybe to just play around with a little bit of APRS, just have a, maybe one of those like a developer's garage party that the guys back in Melbourne used to have.
Oh, for sure. And bring your Android phones, and you'll get fixed up with either Test Host if you get lucky, or APRS Droid. And with APRS Droid, you get that mobile link in there. You can do the RF. I believe APRS Droid can interface to the Bluetooth TNC and a D74 as well.
That's amazing.
So all good stuff. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Lynn. Great job.
Have a great night.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.